This is Today as It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day, from developments on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas to the economic impact of the federal government shutdown. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. New York Attorney General Letitia James indicted on mortgage fraud charges in a case President Trump urged his Justice Department to bring. James is charged with bank fraud and making false statements in connection with a 2020 home purchase in Virginia. Now, she has called the charges baseless, and she accused Trump of weaponizing the justice system.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost.
And Trump has been advocating for charging Letitia James for months. This was a post he put up on Truth Social on September 20th, saying that she's, quote, guilty as hell without citing evidence. He also called for charges against former FBI Director James Comey. Those came down a couple of weeks ago. He's also calling in this post for charges against Senator Adam Schiff. No charges there yet, but we do know there has been an investigation opened up. Now, James sued the Republican president dozens of times and won a staggering judgment against him and his companies last year. He's appealing that. James is scheduled to appear in federal court in Virginia on October 24th. Scary scenes there. Two powerful earthquakes hit the southern Philippines hours apart on Friday. The first 7.4 magnitude quake killed at least 7 people that we know of at this point. It set off landslides there. A second 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit the same region later, and there are fears it could further weaken already damaged structures there. Both of these earthquakes triggered brief tsunami warnings that were later lifted. And the earthquakes caused cracks in buildings, including an international airport, though it remained operational. Hundreds of residents were hurt. Schools have evacuated students. And parts of Ukraine without electricity after Russian drone and missile strikes targeted the country's power grid. One of those strikes hit an apartment building in Kyiv, causing a fire which engulfed 2 floors. Crews had to rescue more than 20 people who were inside. At least one child was killed in another strike in southeastern Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian Prime Minister called it one of the largest concentrated strikes against the country's energy grid. Russia launched 465 drones and 32 missiles in this latest barrage. And we have new developments in the Middle East. An Israel-Hamas ceasefire now in effect after Israel's cabinet approved a peace deal. Tens of thousands of Palestinians began walking north. You can see that here after the announcement. The agreement pauses a 2-year war that's killed tens of thousands of people and reduced much of Gaza to rubble. This deal includes exchanging remaining hostages for Palestinian prisoners. Scripps News international correspondent Blake Sifton has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military announced that they have completed their withdrawal to the agreed-upon lines at noon local time today, and the ceasefire was then in effect. Now, according to the text of the agreement that was signed in Egypt, the ceasefire was meant to begin the moment the Israeli cabinet approved the deal, and that would have been much earlier this morning. However, we understand that the Israeli military carried out their withdrawal from Gaza under the cover of shelling from tank fire as well as artillery. But the withdrawal is complete and the ceasefire is now in effect. Now, this will leave Israeli forces in control of some 53% of Gaza. However, they will be outside of most major population centers. And now, with the freedom of movement, we're beginning to see Palestinian civilians returning to the north, returning to Gaza City. These are the hundreds of thousands of people who fled Gaza City either ahead of or during the Israeli military offensive to seize and occupy that city. Now, we're seeing thousands of them flooding back up the coastal road to the north. Many people at the time they left they were evacuated. They said they didn't believe they were ever going to be able to go home again because they believed that the city was going to be destroyed or that they were going to be permanently displaced. So there is a great deal of relief there. Now, as well, now that the military withdrawal has been completed, the clock begins ticking down on the 72-hour deadline for Hamas to release the Israeli hostages. We understand that that is expected by noon Monday. There may be some flexibility on the release of all of the bodies of deceased hostages because Hamas have said in the past that it will take a bit longer for them to collect all of those hostages. Now, we're also hearing more about the Palestinian prisoners that will be released in exchange for the Israeli hostages. These are the 250 so-called security prisoners serving life sentences in Israeli jails. The Israeli government has released the list of those prisoners, and crucially, none of the highest profile prisoners that Hamas had been pushing for are included on that list. Blake Sifton, Scripps News Group, Tel Aviv.
All right, thanks so much, Blake. And the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize winner is Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. The Norwegian Nobel Committee announced the award at a ceremony in Oslo this morning. Now, Machado praised for promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela. The committee says she helped to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. Machado went into hiding following last year's election in Venezuela. It's unclear whether she will be able to attend the ceremony to accept the Peace Prize in Norway in December. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
President Trump's immigration crackdown is not only playing out in the streets of sanctuary cities, but also in the courthouses. I'm Katie Tubman. Coming up, how immigration court has changed under the Trump administration's mass deportation plan and why advocates worry matters will get worse.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. National Guard troops are on the streets of Memphis for the first time. At least 9 National Guard troops began their patrol at the Bass Pro Shops, which is located at the Pyramid. This is an iconic landmark in Memphis. You can see here, escorted by a Memphis police officer. It's unclear how many Guard members are on the ground or expected to arrive later. On Thursday, a federal judge in Illinois blocked troops from deploying in Chicago for at least 2 weeks. The judge said there's no evidence of a, quote, danger of rebellion during Trump's immigration crackdown. Now, this ruling gives Democratic officials a victory against the administration's push to send troops to multiple U.S. cities. We're tracking other lawsuits as well, specifically in Portland. And we have seen the Trump administration's mass deportation efforts largely play out in the streets of several of these cities, but it's also intensifying in courthouses. Scripps News national correspondent Katie Tubman joins us now live from New York with more details on this. Katie, I know you cover this extensively and you're often in these courthouses. So what are you seeing?
Well, good morning, Maritza. Immigration courts have become a battleground in the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. And in recent weeks, we've seen that battle escalate with a few violent confrontations here in New York. And advocates worry that matters will get worse. For 20 years, Father Eduardo Fabian Arias has shown up to immigration courts in New York City. He is a friendly face to immigrants who arrive here at 26 Federal Plaza, scared of what will happen inside.
Thank you very much.
But lately, even he doesn't know how to reassure them.
My question every day for the last 6 months is where I am. And now it's more aggressive, physical aggressive.
In recent weeks, tensions inside 26 Federal Plaza have reached a new flashpoint as ICE agents continue to carry out courthouse arrests, a deportation tactic that is spreading throughout the country. These halls have become a battleground between the Trump administration's immigration policies and New York City's status as a sanctuary city. Father Fabian has been on the front lines of this battle, accompanying asylum seekers on their day in court. Last month, he was with a woman and her kids after an ICE officer forcefully shoved her to the floor outside a courtroom.
He physically attacked her. Okay. 5 hours later, the director for the ICE suspend this guy. And now he returned to the same place, say, my goodness. Where is the security in this country?
Father Fabian says this increasing aggression makes it risky not only for immigrants who show up to court, but also for their families and supporters.
Because we need to protect the family, we need to protect the people, and we need to protect ourselves.
We went back to 26 Federal Plaza with Father Fabian, who was instantly recognized by lawyers, court employees, and ICE agents. Security guards repeatedly removed him from courtrooms, warned he couldn't speak to the immigrants waiting to be seen by a judge. Meanwhile, out in the hallways, ICE agents continued to grab people like this as they left court.
Why do you go back every week?
Everybody, the human people, men and women in this world, it's my brother and my sister. I need to protect them. It's a reason there. Why every week? I pray and accompaniment to the people because they are my brothers and my sister.
Maritza, new DHS analysis, data analysis has found that the immigrants arrested at court rarely have criminal records, and that a majority of them only have civil immigration charges against them, such as illegally crossing the border. Maritza?
Yeah, Katie, and that's something so many immigration advocates point to. Outside of New York, what are we seeing in other cities where we're seeing a lot of these courthouse arrests in large numbers?
Yeah, we absolutely are. Cities like Los Angeles and Chicago, which we talked about earlier, but these are cities that have either sanctuary policies or the federal government has identified as sanctuary jurisdictions. And it's there that immigration lawyers and advocates worry that they are being explicitly targeted by the Trump administration for having policies that ultimately protect the immigrants in their communities and also limit their cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. Maritza?
All right. Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman live in New York with us. Thank you so much, Katia.
The White House says mass firings of federal workers have started as the government shutdown continues. Budget Director Russ Vought announced on social media that reduction in force plans have begun. And we want to get right out to our Scripps News White House reporter and producer Jacob Gardenswartz, who is live from the North Lawn of the White House with a little bit more on this breaking development. So what can you tell us about this new reduction in force announcement the White House has put out?
Yeah, Stephanie, we are still learning, and our team here at the White House trying to track down as much information as we can. But here's what we know right now. Those long-threatened mass layoffs to government employees, known officially as reductions in force, taking effect at this hour. That's according to the head of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, really seen as the official spearheading this effort. You'll recall this is something that Vought and President Trump have both threatened for some time now as a means of essentially pushing Democrats back to the bargaining table with regard to the government shutdown. An official within the Office of Management and Budget telling us that the layoffs are, quote, substantial, but at this point declining to give any other details insofar as how many employees or agencies might be impacted. We do know that all 200 plus U.S. government agencies were asked to submit plans for these RIFs to the Office of Management and Budget. So really unclear exactly how widespread it could be, though officials at one point had suggested numbers, well into the thousands or even tens of thousands. We'll certainly continue pushing to try to track down more information about who and how many people specifically this impacts. On the flip side, you have unions already suggesting that they are fighting this in court. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, writing online on social media that, quote, "We'll see you in court." You also have the AFL-CIO noting something similar. Unclear whether this is a new lawsuit that has been filed or the existing lawsuit that was filed shortly after the government shutdown and this RIF threat began. You'll recall that was sort of a preemptive lawsuit when the president began threatening this, asking a judge to preemptively block it. At this point, that hasn't happened yet, but now that these RIFs have taken effect, certainly likely that case will continue to move forward a little bit more speedily. We understand that there might be a little bit more of a fulsome response from those unions, perhaps with some more information about who specifically has been impacted shortly. So we'll certainly continue watching out for that and bring you any information as we have it. Stephanie?
Yeah, as we're on day 10 of the government shutdown, already anxious federal employees were even a little more anxious this afternoon. But I want to ask you about another major story we've been following, Jacob. The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, indicted on mortgage fraud charges in a case that really was brought at the urging of President Donald Trump. So what more can you tell us about that indictment?
Yeah, Stephanie, the New York Attorney General Letitia James indicted yesterday evening on 2 counts, one pertaining to bank fraud, another pertaining to making false statements to a financial institution. These both are in relation to a property she purchased in August of 2020 in Norfolk, Virginia. According to the indictment, James is said to have listed that property as a second residence, something like a vacation home, when in fact she used it as a rental, earning some income from it. And because mortgage companies give preferential loan terms to those who are using it as a rental, she's said to have gotten about $19,000 in financial benefit over the course of that loan. Lindsay Halligan, the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, the same U.S. attorney who signed off on the indictment of James Comey, signing off on this indictment, saying in a statement, quote, "No one is above the law. These charges, as alleged in this case, represent intentional criminal acts and tremendous breaches of the public's trust. The facts and the law in this case are clear, and we will continue following them to ensure justice is served." Halligan, of course, a former personal lawyer to President Trump, who until taking this role as interim U.S. attorney had no previous experience prosecuting cases in this way. She was reportedly installed in this after the previous U.S. attorney in that district declined to pursue some of these charges that Trump had wanted. James, of course, is maintaining her innocence, releasing a lengthy statement as well as a video. Listen to some of what she had to say about this case.
These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. We will fight these baseless charges aggressively, and my office will continue to fiercely protect New Yorkers and their rights. And I will continue to do my job.
And James is represented by Abby Lowell. He's that same lawyer who's representing a number of high-profile figures who have been fired by the Trump administration or attempted to be fired, among them Lisa Cook, the official on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, as well as the ousted CDC director, Susan Menarez. He tells Scripps News in a statement that when a president can publicly direct charges to be filed against someone, it makes a serious attack on the rule of law, and we will fight these charges in every process allowed. Of course, this is all coming after a criminal referral by Bill Pulte. He is the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, a prominent Trump ally. He had identified some of these alleged mortgage fraud problems and referred them to the Justice Department, though it's notable that it was really 3 other properties, one in Virginia that James is said to have purchased to help out her niece, as well as 2 others in New York that were the initial subject of this inquiry. This 4th property, the one that actually received the indictment, was not initially seen as something that was a focus of the investigation, and as such, James' lawyers, who have previously released some information about those other loans, have not given us any specific details about this case. That's certainly something that we'll continue pushing and waiting for. And just lastly, I'll note that while an indictment is a formal accusation of some sort of crime and something that a grand jury has to vote on and approve, that there is some probable cause that the person accused has committed it, it is not a finding of guilt in the same way that a traditional jury finding is. So of course this case will go before a judge and a jury if it is not thrown out before then. James first expected to appear in court on October 24th. Stephanie?
Up next on Today as It Happened.
I'm John Mattery. As you buy that Halloween candy, you'll find prices up on a lot of it this year, but I'll show you some types of candy where you can still find a great deal.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News' rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. Let's jump right in.
If you're handing out candy to trick-or-treaters, that bag of sweets will probably cost you more this year. But what's inside the bag will really determine how much more you'll be paying. Here at Fawn Candy,
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
they've been selling and making candy since 1946.
People use them as favors for holiday parties.
Staffers have been trying to keep prices as low as possible this year despite soaring cocoa costs. But manager Tricia Rayburn refuses to use cheaper ingredients. So she's offering more non-chocolate options to help families on a budget.
We do some of the other candy that is not chocolate.
Supply chain expert Pawan Joshi says a shortage of cocoa from West Africa is the main driver of higher chocolate prices.
The rainfall has been lower. There's also been a disease that's been going through the crop. And just to give you a context, West Africa produces about 60 to 70% of the world's cocoa supply.
Research from the financial services firm Empower shows candy prices are 8% higher than last year and 20% higher than just 3 years ago. It also found shoppers plan to spend a boo-worthy $58 on candy alone.
So if you're really looking to save this year, I would not get chocolate. I would get those sweeter things. Maybe it's Jolly Ranchers or Skittles.
Smart shopping expert Trey Bodge says bigger discounts come closer to Halloween, so hold off if you can. If you're stocking up now, do a price comparison online before you buy. If you have lots of Halloween traffic, buy candy at a wholesale club. On the flip side, if you don't have many kids around, stick with smaller bags so you don't overbuy. Fawn Candy's Tricia suggests giving smaller but still high-quality treats.
We have all kinds of gift ideas from every price range.
That way you don't waste your money. That is the real thing.
That is a real thing.
John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, federal employees are starting to feel the pain as the government shutdown reaches day 10. Stay with us for Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed's rundown of where things stand at the Capitol after the break.
Open the government, Democrats. That's what this is. We have voted so many times to pay the troops. We've already done it. We did it in the House 3 weeks ago. The ball is in the court of Senate Democrats right now. That's it.
The government has been shut down for 10 days. Our men and women in uniform and hardworking federal employees are working without pay. Donald Trump can find the time to play golf, but he can't be bothered negotiating a bipartisan agreement to reopen the government and address the healthcare crisis that they've created. And House Republicans remain on vacation for 3 weeks.
I don't think this is going to happen. I think this is going to happen organically with enough reasonable Senate Democrats who care enough about doing the right thing for their country and not what's in the best interests of their left-wing political base.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
We are continuing to follow developing news on the mass firings of federal workers that was announced earlier this afternoon. But in the meantime, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are getting smaller paychecks today, and they'll be the last paychecks they get until Congress agrees on a spending package. Military personnel will miss their first paycheck on October 15th, something that hasn't happened before. Due to a White House memo, it's unclear whether furloughed staffers are going to get back pay once the government reopens. About 1.4 million federal workers are furloughed or working without pay. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed has more on the state of the stalemate in Congress.
Congress left Washington for the holiday weekend without any agreement to end the government shutdown. When they return on day 14 of this ongoing shutdown, the prospects of finding bipartisan common ground looking as dim as ever. On Friday, government workers, including hundreds of thousands furloughed and others deemed essential and still reporting for work, missing their full paychecks. Flight delays are beginning to become a grim reality. Air traffic controllers, essential workers in a shutdown, calling out sick, exacerbating an existing shortage. Scripps News Group obtaining a new video Friday of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem that could roll out soon at TSA checkpoints across the country, featuring an unusually political message for travelers, squarely blaming Democrats for the government shutdown.
However, Democrats in Congress refuse to fund the federal government, and because of this, many of our operations are impacted, and most of our TSA employees are working without pay.
On Thursday evening, the Senate left Washington after passing the National Defense Authorization Act, finding bipartisan common ground on the military budget, but no agreement yet to reopen the U.S. government. Progress in the Senate has been virtually non-existent, as both sides remain dug in, with Senators Thursday rejecting the House-passed Republican funding plan for the 7th time.
It becomes real here soon when people start not getting paychecks.
If the government remains shuttered, members of the military could miss a paycheck, injecting even more uncertainty and economic pressure as a bipartisan group of lawmakers have drafted legislation that would pay members of the military, even if the government remains shuttered. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has kept the House of Representatives out of Washington for nearly a month, complicating the prospects for any bipartisan plan, Democratic leaders urging him to bring the House back into session.
What House Republicans need to do is come back so we can address the military pay issue and reopen the government. I mean, this is an extraordinary thing. It's unbelievable.
As the shutdown continues to stretch on, uncertainty and economic stress for government workers continues to ramp up. Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News Group, Washington.
We have just learned that the Education Department is among the agencies being hit with these layoffs, but we don't know how many employees are going to be fired as part of this reduction in force. The department was already cut in half this year, going from 4,100 employees to 2,500. Prior to the shutdown, President Trump had said he wanted to dismantle the Department of Education, and when he tapped Linda McMahon to serve as the Secretary of Education, he said to her the goal was to, quote, put herself out of a job. Now let's dig in more on how this prolonged shutdown is impacting Americans. We've talked about flight disruptions, national parks and federal buildings being closed, but for thousands of families, the disruptions of essential government services like public health and nutrition and housing could be life-threatening. I want to listen to a military wife's emotional plea with House Speaker Mike Johnson that happened on C-SPAN.
I have 2 medically fragile children. I have a husband who actively serves this country. He suffers from PTSD from his 2 tours in Afghanistan. If we see a lapse in pay come the 15th, my children do not get to get the medication that's needed for them to live their life, because we live paycheck to paycheck. I heard you earlier say that you side with President Trump on anything that he says. Well, I just read an article this morning that said he absolutely wholeheartedly believes that there needs to be legislation put in so that we do not miss a paycheck. You have the power to do that. And as a Republican, I'm very disappointed in my party, and I'm very disappointed in you, because you do have the power to call the House back. You did that, or you refused to do that just for a show.
I'm so sorry to hear about your situation. The reason I've been so angry this week, and they've been calling me out on media, Johnson's angry. I am angry because of situations just like yours. I have a big military district, and my district is the home of the Global Strike Command at Barksdale Air Force Base and Fort Polk, the Joint Readiness Training Center. I have one of the biggest military districts and military families in America. I have a lot of airmen and soldiers who are deployed right now, and they have young families at home, and they have children in health situations like yours. This is what keeps me up at night. I want you to hear something very clearly. The Republicans are the ones delivering for you. We had a vote to pay the troops. It was the continuing resolution 3 weeks ago. Every single Republican but 2 voted to keep the government open so that your paycheck can flow. Every Democrat in the House, except for 1, voted to close it. The Democrats are the ones that are preventing you from getting a check.
Joining us now is Nicole Upano, the AVP of Housing Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the National Apartment Association. And many, as a renter myself, many federal workers across the country are probably wondering about paying rent this month. So, Nicole, I wanted to start with, the frustration, the heartache from that mom is abundantly clear. And I can imagine there are people across the country with similar concerns. So what is the biggest impact on renters, especially those who might be relying on federal assistance?
Hi, Stephanie. Yes, as you know, federal housing subsidies and many other federal programs that support rental communities and renters, they are not mandatory spending and are impacted by the shutdown. That said, there is some good news here. Millions of renters and their families that benefit from Section 8 and rural housing assistance, they will have their benefits paid through the end of the year due to an advanced appropriation. We're continuing to monitor the situation closely. As long as this goes, the uncertainty for apartments and renters increase, including looking at the National Flood Insurance Program.
Well, it's not just, government workers being furloughed. Now we know for sure that some government workers are getting fired. We know in, past shutdowns, maybe people have been able to work out a deal with their landlord where they can catch up on rent when they receive their back pay. But that back pay is in question, and people are already getting layoff notices. So what happens if that back pay never comes, or for renters who might be laid off as part of this process the White House is taking today?
Well, we're continuing to monitor the situation very closely. Our main concern is to help housing providers adapt, support their residents, and respond to the changing circumstances. We continue to promote live updates and encourage our members to work with their residents.
You mentioned that the Section 8, for example, that is due to be funded from the end of the year. But are there other HUD subsidies, housing and urban development subsidies, that might not last that long? Or is there a deadline when other programs might be running out of funding sooner?
Well, one program I would point you to is the National Flood Insurance Program. Mortgages are contingent on the purchase and the renewal of flood insurance, and that could impact 20,000 communities across the country. Now that we're in hurricane season, there is certainly that greater risk of a disruption in processing claims.
Where are those, you said 20,000 communities. Where are those communities? What regions are we talking about? Because I know some, regions where you can't get flood insurance, so it might not be tied. So can you kind of give me some examples of who we're talking about here?
Sure, the National Flood Insurance Program is meant to be a federal backstop, like you said, in places that where folks can't access. So it is intended to be a national program and not pick and choose.
Got it. So, if funds run out for these programs, if this shutdown drags on, what are the real life impacts for Americans who won't be getting that federal assistance?
Well, one good news that we are hearing from HUD is that local governments have access to HUD funds to help renters, Section 8 renters and their families that are experiencing a housing emergency. They're trying to reduce disruptions as much as possible, and they're still processing renewals and processing loans so that we can continue to put a dent in the undersupply crisis and keep the flow of quality, affordable housing going across the country.
Let's talk about people who aren't getting federal help to pay for their rent, just regular federal workers who are paying their rent on a monthly basis. What's your advice to them? What should they do? What do they need to be doing to talk to their landlords to avoid, potentially losing the roof over their head during the shutdown?
So NAA is the trade association for rental housing providers all across the country. We've seen in past shutdowns and also recently in the pandemic that our members have stepped up to help their residents and help them navigate through the situation. If they don't have access to housing subsidies, they're helping point them to local resources to help them bridge the gap.
Nicole Upano with the National Apartment Association. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Stephanie.
This is Today as It Happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News' debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
We want to start by taking a live look at the markets this afternoon that are taking a hit. The Dow Jones right now, down 875 points. And that Dow's not alone. The S&P 500 also dropping 2.1%. The NASDAQ down 2.8%. And investors certainly seem to be reacting to a threat from President Trump on social media to add a new, quote, massive increase of tariffs, end quote, on Chinese imports. The president, keep in mind, already has imposed an average of a 55% tariff on Chinese goods. The threat comes after Beijing's announcement yesterday that it will tighten export rules on rare earth minerals and the associated technology. So China has 70% of all the world's rare earth elements, and they are critical in a lot of technology. We're talking jet engines, laptops, cell phones. Beijing will now require foreign companies to get special approval to export items that contain even a trace amount of these rare earth minerals. Back here in the U.S., 19 people are missing and presumed dead after a massive explosion at a military munition plant in Tennessee. The explosion happened early this morning. It's about 60 miles from Nashville. Rescuers couldn't initially access the site because of ongoing secondary explosions, but officials now say the scene is under control. Humphreys County Sheriff Chris Davis said it was one of the most devastating scenes he's ever seen. The power of the initial explosion was so strong that residents 20 miles away felt their homes shake.
On the ground here in Humphreys County, Tennessee, the scene, as the sheriff here puts it, is devastating. He said it was one of the most devastating scenes he's seen in his career. That's after an explosion at the Accurate Energetic Systems just after 8 Friday morning. AES is a company that processes explosives for the military and other commercial businesses. The sheriff here says 19 people are unaccounted for. As he put it, they're searching for 19 souls. But there are fatalities, he said. He would not elaborate on how many confirmed fatalities there are. And this is a massive scene. This is a site where people are going about during a normal day, but trying now to piece together what happened. AES is a 1,300-acre site that spans 2 counties in Tennessee. And as such, the sheriff here says this site will be under process and under investigation for a long time, processing things step by step without a short-term explanation of what happened here. And this is a community that has gone through so much in the last several years, including catastrophic flooding that killed 20 people here back in 2021, and a blast at the same site as the one today in 2014 that killed 1 person and injured 3. And from the images that we are seeing, this incident appears much larger than that incident that happened at the same site back in 2014, as help from around Tennessee continues to pour in. In Humphreys County, Tennessee, Jason Lamb, Scripps News.
Up next on Today as It Happened. Excitement, but also anxiety. That's how hostage members are feeling ahead of their loved one's release. I'm Alex Miller in New York. My conversation with one family member ahead.
The United Nations says Israel has given the green light to begin delivering aid in Gaza starting Sunday. A United Nations official speaking anonymously says the aid includes 170,000 metric tons that is already positioned in Jordan and Egypt. Humanitarian officials had been waiting for permission from Israeli forces to restart their work. In recent months, the UN and its partners have only been able to deliver 20% of the aid needed in the Gaza Strip. I want to take a look at new video showing tens of thousands of Palestinians walking north, starting after the Israel-Hamas ceasefire took effect. So many Palestinians sharing their joy about finally being able to head home after being displaced for months or even years. And families of hostages that are a critical part of this ceasefire negotiation are reacting to the news with some cautious optimism. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller has been speaking with some of those families about the complicated emotions that they've been facing. So Alex, what do we know about the release of hostages and when that's supposed to happen?
Well, Steph, we are 11 hours into this deal. Hamas has until Monday at noon local time to release all hostages, living and dead. Now, I spoke with Eviatar David's cousin, Matan. Eviatar is the hostage that you might remember was in a video digging his own grave. Matan told me that they have not been given any real update about how they are going to be receiving Eviatar. Basically, we know that they are likely going to be brought to the Kerem Shalom crossing, where many other hostages have come through, and then they will go to a hospital. But essentially what Matan said is they are just waiting for a text message. Listen to our conversation about the anxiety he's feeling leading up to that. How are you feeling? What was your reaction to hearing this news?
a sign of relief. Finally, we heard what we have been praying to hear for such a long time, that the deal is being signed, that is part of the deal. But we are still really anxious until the moment that Eviatar will be hugged by his parents. This part of our journey will not end.
I can sense the anxiety that I still feel like you guys really have. I mean, how scared are you about the fragility of this deal?
In the end, it's a deal with a terror organization, so you can never know what they're trying to do. We are scared that when he'll be on his way to the Red Cross, and before they will cross the border, Gazans will again try and reach the hostages like they did in the last deals. We are scared that they might fed him too much too quickly after starving him, which can hurt him again. It's something that will not end until he'll be here, because we don't know how he's going to be treated until that moment. So yeah, we're anxious. It's the fear and the hope together which just put you on the edge.
What was that like, seeing A, that he was alive, but B, him in that condition?
You speak about it and I have like goosebumps and like chills going down my spine. It was torturous.
And Steph, I asked Matan if he has been able to find any meaning in all of this, all of the work that he has done. And he said, if anything, he's learned how important it is to have family and friends, and how important those relationships are, because you never know when someone might need to advocate for you. And we have seen these families just continue to pour their hearts out over 2 years, crisscrossing the world, family, friends, extended family. And we're seeing this even now with these families as they're waiting for their loved ones. There's 2 hostages still unaccounted for. They are still making every effort to make sure that their loved ones are known, and the families of the deceased hostages as well. There's a concern that they may never see their loved ones again. I mean, some of these families have been all over the world for 2 years just trying to get their loved ones' bodies back, and now they're being told that there's a potential that they won't even have that happen. And we know that right now an international coalition of sorts has been assembled to try to find these deceased hostages so that they are able to be returned home. That deadline is also still Monday, and that's why Matan says this deal is so fragile, because we don't know how the sides are going to react if they're not able to find all of these hostages.
A heartbreaking and emotional story, and thank you so much for staying on top of it for us. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller, live from New York.
Thanks for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Marisa Giorgio. Have a great Friday night and an excellent weekend.